is the beginning of my virtual book tour, so I'm so excited to spend this time with you. Thank you for taking this time to spend with me so that I can help you NeuroCycle. NeuroCycling is one of the most amazing things that you're going to learn because it basically helps you manage your mind. And if you don't manage your mind, then your mind's just going to be a mess. And if everything's a mess, if your mind's a mess, everything's a mess. So let me start by saying that the virtual book tour is about this book, my new book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. 5 simple scientifically proven steps to reduce anxiety, stress, and toxic thinking. This is based on 38 years of cumulative research over the past almost 3 decades from my 25 years in clinical practice and 38 years in this field. I have been researching the questions of what is mind? What are thoughts? What are emotions? What are memories? How do they work? What's the brain? What's this mind-brain connection? Is there a difference? And the most important question, do you have any level of control over your thoughts which are in your mind, which are the result of your mind working? So therefore, do you have control over your mind? And the answer is yes. And that's what I'm so excited to tell you and teach you in this book. And the introduction is in this workshop. So right now, if you haven't already pre-ordered this book, go now and pre-order this book. Go to cleaningupyourmentalmess.com or go to drleaf.com. Pre-order the book from wherever you buy books, and then make sure you come back and register your pre-order at cleaningupyourmentalmess.com, and then you get access to the most wonderful pre-order bonuses, which will include 3 weeks, very similar to this workshop that we're doing now. Plus, you're going to get free chapters. For example, an extra chapter on how to manage stress, an extra chapter for kids, how to help your kids NeuroCycle. You're going to get a month free on my NeuroCycle app, which is the audio version. Well, it's literally more than the audio version. It's literally therapy of how to NeuroCycle through these cycles of 63 days and manage all kinds of things like grief and anger, anxiety, and people pleasing. So there's a lot of different guides in that app with loads and loads of material to help you in the moment by moment things of daily life. You're also going to get access to a downloadable workshop, amazing pre-order bonuses. But you can only get that if you pre-order. So go pre-order your book now. And then once you've got your book, this particular session is going to be accessible on my YouTube channel. So you can go and follow me, register on my YouTube channel. You'll be able to then re-watch this workshop with your book, and you'll be able to get so much more out of it. And you can also see it on Facebook. So there's so much that we are trying to give you to help you to manage your mind. Listen, guys, considering that you can go 3 weeks without food. Yes, you can. I know we don't think that. 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without oxygen. But you don't even go 3 seconds without your mind working. Your mind is always working regardless. Whether you like it or not, your mind is always working. So either you manage the way your mind is working and therefore manage your life, or you just let it kind of go through in this erratic way, and when that happens, then your mind's a mess and your life's a mess. So my argument or my thesis or my proposal to you is, if your mind is always working, if you wake up with your mind, you eat with your mind, you get dressed with your mind, you're watching this workshop with your mind, you have your conversations with your family with your mind, you do your work with your mind, you do your workout with your mind, you go to sleep with your mind. If you are always using your mind, then don't you want to know how to manage it? Because it's your mind that then builds the thoughts into your brain and in your body and in the energy fields of your mind, and we can learn about that in a moment, and that is then influencing how you function. So your functioning, what you say, what you do, how you are in your relationships, how you are at work, how you are in the moment by moment stuff, all of that is managed by your mind. So that's all just messy and erratic. Then those things are messy and erratic. Now, this doesn't mean when you learn how to NeuroCycle through managing your mind that it's just going to be all perfect. What it means is that you will learn to manage your mind and build hope inside of you and build the sense of peace inside of you. You're still going to make a mess. I still make a mess. I still make mental messes all the time. That's why I wrote the book. I think I wrote it for me most, and I'll share the knowledge with you. But we all still make mental messes. If you're human, you have mental health issues. No one's exempt. We all make mental messes. We can get irritated. We can argue. We can get worked up about work. let's face it, as soon as you wake up in the morning, it starts. Life, the processing of life begins. We are immersed in the experience of aliveness and of the experiences of life. And they are changing moment by moment. And what does that actually mean? You wake up, you open your eyes, and you maybe grab your phone and you read a text from your boss or your friend, or you scroll Instagram and suddenly you see something that makes you feel like you've got imposter syndrome, or the email from your boss makes you freak out because you're now panicking, or your kids come in the room and they're screaming and fighting, or I don't know what. But things happen, then you've got to get up and get through the day. Your mind is already processing each of those things and you're aware of this every 10 seconds, but your mind is processing each of these things at 400 billion actions per second on the non-conscious level. And when I say your mind is processing these things, it's your mind that takes in this experience and thinks, and the processing action is thinking, feeling, choosing, and then it builds this is an energy force. This thinking, feeling, choosing thing that you're doing is an energy force. And here I've got a model of the brain and the body. So the thinking, the mind is your aliveness, your energy field around your brain and through your brain and your body. So here you wake up, here you read the email, it's your mind, that information comes in as electromagnetic light signals. You think, feel, choose, that goes through your brain, and you use your brain to convert that into little thoughts inside of your brain. So if it's a toxic experience, then it's these toxic thoughts that are all these misfolded proteins, and your brain doesn't like that. So your immune system starts freaking out, and your brain starts getting inflamed, and all kinds of things go wrong in your brain and body instantly. But if it's a healthy response, if you've managed your mind, you're going to build a nice, healthy thought. And thoughts do look like trees. That's why I use this analogy. So as a tree has roots, so does the thought have roots. But we'll speak about the structure of thoughts in a moment. This is just the general concept and the general introduction of why we need mind management. So then the next instance happens, and then the next instance, everything you're going through is building into your brain. And in fact, during the course of the day, you're going to build somewhere between 8 to 10,000 and maybe more thoughts in response to around about 8 to 10,000 experiences that you will have during the day. And that's just today. And in building those, you're going to bring up a whole bunch of other thoughts that already exist inside of your brain in the non-conscious level, because you've been building thoughts with your mind since you're at a certain stage in the womb right up to today. So you've got massive forests in your brain and your mind of all your experiences stored as thoughts in your brain, in your mind, and your body. So as you are listening to me now and building this information into your brain as a thought tree, and you're building a good thought tree because I'm telling you good stuff, you're doing that at 400 billion actions per second. But this building of this information is being influenced by all kinds of other thoughts popping up. So maybe if I say the word trauma, a toxic thought will pop up. And as I'm saying, whatever I'm saying to you, you are using your past experience, in other words, the thoughts that are already in your head, to help you understand what I'm saying and to make sense and link the thoughts together. And so that is about 3 times the amount of what you have that you're building. So if you're building around 8 to 10,000 thoughts, and in building those you draw on 3 times the amount, that means you have in any one day anything up to 30, 40,000 thoughts going through your head. And if you, and you're brilliant. I just want to tell you, you're probably thinking, oh, no wonder I feel so crazy. No wonder my head's so full. No wonder I always feel like stuck. Well, let me tell you that you are so brilliant that your brain is designed to handle that. Your body's designed to handle that. But the only way that they handle it properly, the only way that your brain and body respond like they should, is if your mind is being managed. If your mind, so this is happening regardless, okay? I keep saying that, okay? You don't even go 3 seconds without thinking. Whether you're managing or not, your mind is still in action. So if you've got all this action happening, if your mind is managed, you can then manage this process. Because as I show in the beginning part of my book, I have, in the first half of my book, I have put my most recent clinical trials summarized in a really simple, easy way so that you can understand the science of what happens when we have this mental mess in our mind, what actually happens in the brain and the body. So that mind-brain integration, or what is the effect of thoughts on, for example, metabolism? What is the effect of our thinking, toxic thinking, on our immune system, on our heart, on our brain, on our cardiovascular system, on our hormones, on our skin, on all the different parts of your lungs, your kidneys, your total functioning, your total systemic functioning, even down to the level of your DNA. So I looked at certain different, what we call biomarkers, like things that are in your blood, for example, your cortisol and homocysteine and ACTH and DHEA, various different blood biomarkers and DNA biomarkers to look at what is the impact of toxic thinking on your brain and body, and can you change that? So, and then I also looked inside the brain using the neuroscientific technique of the QEEG, which looks at the energetic response of the brain. So it looks at how there are different waves of the brain, I've given lots of explanations and diagrams and everything to understand. But your brain has this different waves, like you have waves in the sea, and the waves are what we call delta, theta, alpha, beta, high beta, and gamma, and they should flow like the waves in the sea, from the big swells at the deeper parts of the sea to the like slightly less deep swells, to the building up of the wave, to the crest, to the crashing on the beach, and then the little ripple, and then it all sucks back in again. We want that kind of wave going through the brain, which generates a very peaceful wave through the rest of the body. So I show in my clinical trials that when we manage our mind, which was our experimental group, were tested with all these different things, and they were given the NeuroCycle in the app form, which is basically exactly what's in here. And we found that at the beginning of the study, their blood marks were off. They had inflammation. They were vulnerable to disease. Their biological ages, in other words, the health of their cells, and you're made of cells, which then make up your brain and body and everything else. But the health of these cells was so bad that some of my subjects at the beginning of the study, their biological age, which is the age of your cells and organs, was up to 30 years older than their actual age. And what that meant was that they were in their 30s or 40s, but they had bodies of a 60 or 70-year-old, a sickly 60 or 70-year-old. Now, if you're sitting at 30 and you have a sickly body of a 60 to 70-year-old and you're not managing your mind, what you've done is you've increased vulnerability. You've increased vulnerability to disease because of the lowered immune response. We see that without mind management, your immunity can drop by up to 60%. Now, that's scary. I mean, considering we're living in this climate of COVID, and we're living in this where we need our immune system strong, and just in general, bacteria and diseases and things, we need strong immune systems. And your mind affects your immune system, affects your metabolism. Within seconds of being toxically unmanaged, having a toxically unmanaged mind, your glucose levels can plummet through the roof, which means your cortisol plummets through the roof, which means your metabolism is affected, and all these cascading things will happen. But within seconds, using the NeuroCycle, you can change that. And you can change the biological age of your body. I showed in cycles of 3 weeks, so that within 9 weeks, you can change the biological status of your body. And this is an ongoing process. I'm not talking about a one-off thing. I'm talking about an ongoing process. Mind management is a skill that we have the ability to develop, and it's linked to self-regulation. And neuroscience shows us that we can self-regulate every 10 seconds, which means that I'm not asking you to watch your watch every 10 seconds. What it means is that you can actually manage, when you're awake, when you're conscious, you can constantly be managing how you are thinking and feeling and choosing to make sure that you're not making a mental mess. And that's what the NeuroCycle teaches you to do. The more you use it, the more self-regulated you get. So I'm at the point in my life where I've developed this, used it for all these years, and practice using it, and I still make a mental mess. But here's the difference. I, in the past, would maybe have something that upset me, and then I would let it penetrate through the day, maybe the week, and it would just kind of be this hovering thing that was affecting all my ability to function on a high level. And then when an acute trauma happens, which it does, we can't control the events and circumstances of life, but we can control our reactions. When that happens, then that kind of throws everything else off, and you get even worse, okay? And this can be a cascading cycle. So what I now found in my own life is that I can get things under control so much quicker. So instead of it lasting for hours and days and weeks and months, I can get things under control within a few minutes. And if I see I have a pattern in my life that I keep responding in a certain way to certain triggers, and it's affecting me on a mental and physical level, and it's affecting my work, and it's affecting my relationships, then I recognize that as a pattern, and I can work on it in these cycles of 63 days. And that's what this book is going to teach you. You see, what we see in this current environment is some scary stuff. But now I'm going to move to the slideshow just to start helping you understand a little bit of the stuff that I'm sharing. So, toxic thoughts can be like a virus. Now, I'm going to show you a toxic tree, and we're going to look back at this toxic tree, and we'll look back at the slide. So it's going to quickly show you this toxic tree that I'm holding. So this toxic tree, when you is basically a representation of a thought. But when we're going to have a deeper look at what a thought is in a moment. But I just want you to understand that thoughts are real things, that you build these into your brain with your mind, and that this is what our brain is wired for survival. And survival looks like this. COVID is threatening our survival. A virus, a bacteria threatens our survival. So that's why the immune system is in our brain and our body to then send out immune factors, T lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, macrophages, etc., to fight this. So that brings inflammation in the area, and inflammation then allows your body to heal, and then the inflammation goes away. Now, a toxic thought is recognized by the immune system in exactly the same way. So that's really important, that we understand that a toxic thought is as real to your brain and your brain's immune system and your body's immune system as a virus, which means it threatens survival, which means we can't just keep them. If you just suppress and push things down, it's going to explode in some way, physically and mentally, and both at some point, because they are volcanic. These are volcanic in nature. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. And what I'm going to talk to you about is how we can be empowered, where there is a pathway to empowering you. In this book, I am empowering you to realize your sense of agency or autonomy over your mind. So the NeuroCycle enables you to be able to look at a toxic thought and to see that toxic thought for what it is, and recognize that you can manage that toxic thought and the toxic stress that it brings. And in doing so, you can then start seeing barriers and challenges as opportunities. So this is a process of empowerment and agency that we are talking about. If we look at the next slide, you'll see there's just a little bit of a deeper explanation. So if you have a look at the little graph, you'll see the little arrow going up. As you increase autonomy, which is what the NeuroCycle does, you'll be much more aware of your toxic thoughts, and they'll start decreasing, and your toxic stress will start decreasing, and things like you will start seeing barriers as opportunities, and this is how you will increase your empowerment. So the more you do the NeuroCycle, the more you're going to have that effect. So if you look at the next slide, I now quickly want you to understand what the mind is versus what the brain is. So the mind and the brain are not the same thing. So here I'm holding up a skull with a brain in. It's not real, okay? And this is not who you are. We live in an era where the mind and the brain, those words are used interchangeably, but they're not. Your brain is 1% of who you are, and your brain and your body are 1% of who you are, more or less, and then 1%, and your mind is 99% of who you are. So now, let's have a look at another model, and this is the model of the body. So there's the brain and the body. Look at yourself physically. The physical that you can see, and obviously with the stuff inside your brain and then the cells and all that stuff, that is 1% of who you are. But your mind is around and through. This is the work, this research started over 120 years ago, even actually earlier than that, with Einstein's work on photoelectric effects and photons. We just recently, some Nobel Prize winners won the Nobel Prize for their work in gravitational fields. So what I'm talking about now is hardcore science. When you're alive, you have this energetic field, an electromagnetic field, gravitational field around and through you. If you're dead, you don't have it. And that gravitational field is the force that keeps the body and the brain working. It's your aliveness. It's the mind. It's your thinking, feeling, choosing. So your thinking, feeling, choosing is this force that is happening now at 400 billion actions per second, and taking my words and putting them into the brain as these little trees. So the mind is 99% of who you are, and it's gravitational fields. And when we have a toxic experience and a toxic reaction, we get disruptions in the energetic field, which then creates these kind of thoughts. When we manage our mind, then these kind of thoughts are then converting into healthy versions, reconceptualized, and then those fields which moves outside and through the brain and the body move from that to a nice wave, like the waves that I described earlier on in the sea. Okay, so if we look back at the slide, just a quick summary, you'll see that the mind is 99% of who you are. It's the non-physical spiritual part of who you are. It's the mind. It's how we think, feel, choose. It's so important because it's basically you. It's your aliveness. The brain is 1% of you who you are. It's the physical part and the body, and your brain and body collectively are made of 37 to 100 trillion cells. So now if you look at the next slide, which is really amazing, this is a real human brain, a real live person connected to very advanced technology, and these people are thinking, feeling, and choosing. They're alive. Their aliveness, their energy force, the gravitational field of their unique energy force is responding to whatever the questions were that the people were asking. And if you look back at the slide, you'll see that the light shining through is the mind moving through the brain, and the brain responding electromagnetically, chemically, genetically, and on a quantum level, and converting this thinking, feeling, choosing into these protein structures that are thoughts. So now if we look back at the screen, basically what I've just described is that this energy force around the brain and the body, and by the way, you have yours, I have mine, I can't take yours, you can't take mine, but we can enhance each other. So essentially what I'm showing you here is on that slide is that at the moment your thinking, feeling, choosing is creating that firing pattern on the brain. Let's look back at the slide again, and you'll see the firing pattern in the brain. I'm going to actually show it to you again, and we're going to have a look at that again and talk just a little bit more. When your mind is a mess, that firing pattern through the brain, which is your mind, this gravitational field, this incredible force, this aliveness, this your thinking, feeling, choosing, is moving through your brain, and your brain is responding. And if it's a mess, then that's a mess, which means that you build the mess. But you can change it. This is the hope that we have. You can change this at any point. So let's have a look back. At the toxic thoughts. This is not your destiny. This is the consequence of your experience. We are experimenting through life. We can't control the events and circumstances, as I said, but we can learn to manage how we think, feel, and choose in response. So it's experimental. So sometimes we think, feel, and choose impulsively, and we make a toxic mess, but then we can manage that. And what our brain is designed for is not keeping these. Our brain is designed to fix these. Our brain is designed, and our body and our mind are designed for survival, which is these. And survival is also recognizing these and fixing them. So when you recognize your toxic issue and you start working out what it is, then your brain is moving into a healthy mode. When you suppress this and don't deal with this and just keep this and think, well, this is who I am and I can't do anything about it, and I've got some clinical brain disease or neuropsychiatric brain disease and it's kind of hopeless, if I have that, then 1,400 neurophysiological responses will work against me instead of for me. But if I say, okay, I embrace these emotional signals and these physical signals, I embrace this depression, I embrace this pattern, not because you're happy about what you're doing, but because if you embrace it, you now know from what I'm going to tell you is that when you embrace it, you can change it. You see, you can change it. I said in the beginning, can you control your mind? I spoke about the pathway to empowerment and getting autonomy and facing toxic thoughts. This is what you're doing. You are able to change how, not by suppressing, but by facing, by embracing. You've got to feel it to heal it. You've got to go through it. The only way out is through. So the whole concept of the NeuroCycle is to train ourselves to self-regulate. What are we thinking, feeling, and choosing in the moment, in the day-to-day stuff that's disrupting our functioning, and what are we thinking, feeling, and choosing in patterns that relates to established traumas and toxic habits from the past. So it's two levels. We have to manage the moment with a NeuroCycle, and we have to look for the patterns and then change those over cycles of 63 days. And I'm going to tell you how to do that. So let's now go back quickly, look at the slide and understand the structure of a thought, and then we're going to get into the NeuroCycle. Okay, so thoughts, in your brain you've got neurons, and thoughts basically build onto the neurons. So thoughts look like trees. And if you look at the next slide, there's a forest of trees in the brain. Those are thoughts. You build those. This is neuroplasticity. I did some of the first neuroplasticity research in my field back in the 80s. So you build these thoughts. Okay, so if you look at the next slide, here is what you are doing in your brain right now. And this is obviously slowed down, and obviously it looks unique for each of you, but basically you are growing thoughts. So if you have a look at the slide, you'll see movement. And this movement basically is my words coming at you as auditory signals and electromagnetic signals, and you converting those to your think, feel, choose mind into thoughts inside of your brain, these tree-like structures inside of your brain. Okay, so if you look at the next slide, we're going to talk about, you're going to see a picture of a tree on the screen. And basically, if it's a summary of what I've said. The mind is how you think and feel and choose. And thoughts are therefore the end product of the mind. So when you think, feel and choose, and there's all that firing going on in your brain and all those little branches growing, that is you growing thoughts of the experience in your mind. And look at the tree structure. It's got roots, and it's got a tree trunk, and it's got the leaves and the branches, and it's the branches with the leaves. Now, the root part is the origin story. Like right now, the roots of the tree that you're building in the brain, and you're building a nice healthy tree, is what I'm saying. So everything I'm saying is growing in the root part. And then the tree trunk and the branches and the leaves are your interpretation of what I'm saying. Each of us is completely unique in how we think, feel, and choose. So each of you will interpret this information in your own unique way, and that grows in your interpretation is in the leaves and the branches, as your behaviors and your emotions and your understanding. That whole tree, the roots, the tree trunk, and the leaves and the branches are what you use to act, to behave, to your behaviors, so your communication. So whatever you're saying and doing, so whatever you say after this workshop and how you apply it is based on this whole tree that you have built. And as you apply it, then you learn more, and you add more things onto the branches and leaves, and you keep on growing, and you keep on growing. So as you're going through this, we can actually constantly clean up our mental mess. Because if you think about this, if we don't shape ourselves, the world will shape us. And I think of it like just the other night, I'm doing so many interviews at the moment for my book tour, and I was going like from 6:20 in the morning until 9 at night with like literally no breaks, and I was absolutely exhausted. I did everything that I didn't take the breaks that I always tell everyone to break. I didn't take the thinker moments. I just thought, okay, I'm a machine. I can just, conveniently just, forget about these things. And it made such a mess. And by the time I came in the house, my husband, who was just trying to look after me and help me, and he said something that triggered me, but it was, why did you work so long? And I immediately reacted and got mad, saying, I've been working all day. Why are you saying this? Why? And I got all defensive and all angry, and we nearly had a fight. But because I could NeuroCycle, I stopped myself. I immediately stood back, observed my own thinking. And so here's what happened. As I walked into the house, and as my husband said those words to me, that grew the roots. And that was the origin story. It was the words. Then my perception of that was that that I had to defend myself. And so I started this whole defense. But then I self-regulated, and I realized, okay, what are my signals? What are my warning signals? What are my emotional warning signals? I'm tired. I'm overreacting. I'm frustrated. I misread. And my body's tense. My emotional signals were I'm frustrated and I'm tired. My body was completely tense, and I reacted with a very strong body movement. My behaviors were I got snappy back and defensive back. And my perspective was that's not fair. So then I quickly did that. I then reflected, which is step number 2. Why was I doing that? And my answer was obvious. I hadn't taken breaks. I had burnt myself out. It had been a great successful day, but because of that, I didn't actually hear what he was saying. The third step is to write. But when you do this over 63 days, you physically write, and I'm going to share that with you in a moment. But in that moment when I had to quickly fix the situation, the third step of writing, you can do a visual exercise. So when it's the in the moment NeuroCycle, you visualize. When it's the breaking down of the toxic patterns and trauma, then you're going to write. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So I visualized the situation. I saw the day flash by, the recognition that I hadn't rested, etc. I just visualized that whole process very quickly. It took me 10 seconds. I then rechecked where I recognized, okay, well, I didn't. I rechecked, which is I did a little bit of a mental autopsy of the situation, recognized I was tired, reconceptualized that and said, okay, I got defensive because I was tired. Actually, he was just trying to care for me. What was my little 5th step? Active reach. I apologized, explained how I felt, and he explained, and it was all sorted out. Now that was over in a few minutes, but that could have been something that got worse and it created a problem. In the past it would have. That's a simple example of mind management. So I'm always a mental mess, but I clean it up all the time. And that's what I'm trying to say to all of us, is that we've got to stop being so hard on ourselves, because here we have a system that we can use to manage that mental mess in the moment. So if we look quickly at the next slide, I want to show you that this is an image inside the book. In fact, this is actually in the book. Okay, sorry. Okay, I've got an urgent announcement that I have to make. Okay, this is running live. So we had tech issues, but should be resolved now. If you missed the first 30 minutes of the session, don't worry. Sessions will be available on YouTube to view any time after the event. So if you, for some reason, missed the first 30 minutes, I'm so sorry. We had tech issues. They've been working at this since yesterday, but tech is as messy as our minds. That's for sure. So we fixed it. My tech team did a NeuroCycle. They solved the problem, and the active reach is that you will be able to observe or watch the whole event after this. So don't worry if you missed the first part. Listen, there's great stuff still coming. So it's still great, and you can pre-order the book. And if you pre-order the book and you go pre-order now, you're going to get all the pre-order bonuses, and you can only get that if you pre-order. And that is another 3-week book club with me, similar to this, plus bonus chapters for your kids and more about stress management, and a month free on the NeuroCycle app, and discount offers on various different things. It's amazing. So go pre-order now and register your pre-order at cleaningupyourmentalmess.com, and you can get access to that. You can get the book, and you can still watch this on YouTube and Facebook. So never worry. No problems. You see, there we had a chance to NeuroCycle. My team was NeuroCycling. Well done, team. Okay, so there you go. We apply this all the time. Okay, so one more thing that I haven't announced is that we are going to have a free giveaway at the end of the session. So just as well I'm doing it now, not at the beginning, because a whole lot of you would have missed that. So we are going to have a free giveaway. In order for you to get a free signed copy of my book, you're going to have to do one of a couple of things. Pre-order the book and then send a picture of that, DM me or post it somewhere. Make sure that you tag me so that we can see that you pre-ordered the book. That's how you can enter. Or you can post about what are your takeaways from the session. Maybe you can post a little photograph of you watching me on this session and your favorite takeaway. So, and make sure you tag me. So either a favorite takeaway or something about the session or a photograph. Make sure you tag us so that we see you. Otherwise we can't enter you. Or you can show us that you pre-ordered the book. Send us the little pre-order confirmation. Okay, so that's the free announcement, and at the end of the session I will be announcing the winners. Okay, so now let's have a look back at the screen, and I want to show you inside your brain what will happen when you use the NeuroCycle, which is how you manage your mind. And I just want to say up front, when you start the NeuroCycle, it's kind of clumpy. It's like anything. Remember when you learned to ride a bike or drive a car, how confusing it all was at first, and how everything, you fell off the bike and you stalled the car, and then as you practiced, you got better and better. That's the same principle operating with the NeuroCycle. The more you use it, the more self-regulated you become, and the more mental peace you have. One of the things you'll see in one of the chapters of the book, I talk about the fact that people are dying 8 to 25 years younger from what they call deaths of despair. And the age group most affected are 25 to 64-year-olds. So children are losing their parents, and people are dropping dead in the prime of their life. And they're tracking that back to people are dying younger, 8 to 25 years, and COVID's taken another year off people's lives. And the main reason they're saying is it's from preventable lifestyle diseases. And all lifestyle is managed by mind. So how you eat, how you exercise, the decision to eat, the decision to manage the little silly argument that I was having, and the big stuff like trauma that's impacted our relationships, or dealing with in abusive relationships and acute traumas and toxic, all these things of life, the experiences of life, as we manage those, as we get those under control, we make these massive changes. Okay, so if we don't shape our mind will shape us. And what these deaths of despair are showing us, that it's not happiness that keeps people alive. It's not the pursuit of happiness, which we told a lot in the wellness industry and in the pop culture. You've got to get happy, you've got to get happy. And happiness is important, but it's a byproduct of something else. It's a byproduct of hope. So people are dying from a lack of hope. And hope comes from, I've got no control. So I'm telling you now that you don't have control over the events and circumstances, but you do have control over something that is so much more important, and that is your response to the circumstances. So the traumas of the past and the current traumas and the things you're going through and the patterns you have in your life, these are not your destiny. You can learn to make the past work for you in the future. You can change how you want the past to play out into the future, and that's reconceptualization, and that's the end product of neurocycling. So let's look back at the screen, and what you're looking at are head maps. You're looking inside the brain, and this is in the book, by the way. We've actually got these colored graphs in the book, so the book is really beautiful. It's got, do you find it over here, page 169, or it's page 169 for those who already have the book, but this colored image is in the book. Here we go. So this exact thing you're seeing on the screen is in the book. We have a few beautiful colored images in the book. Believe you me, I did a lot of work convincing my publishers to print these because I just wanted you to see this. So the blue brain up there, first of all, you're looking at inside the brain. The top part's the nose, the side is the ears. You're seeing 5 brains in a row, and that is the different waveforms. So we're looking at the delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. Each one is they all work together, each doing something to help you function as a human moment by moment. And they've all got to do certain things and work together in a certain way across the left and the right side of the brain to help you. So this particular subject, this is one of the case studies in my book. And this particular subject came into the study. Well, they all did, but and I'm using this one as an example. Very depressed, very worked up, very like offline, relationships messed up, work messed up, had all the diagnoses, tried the drugs, tried the treatments. They were pretty much, they had it. So this was their kind of last attempt to solve things. And they had all those different tests that I told you about, and the different blood markers, and looked in the brain. And what we see here in the brain is what we call a blue brain. And that means that those waves from the delta to the theta to the peaking on the beach, the beta and the crest, high beta, and the gamma, which is the little ripples on the beach, that wasn't happening. It was kind of flat line. And that's not good, because when it's flat line, it means you don't have enough oxygen and blood flow to the front of your brain. And you don't have enough balance between the two sides of your brain, which will affect everything else, down cascading effect through the entire body, and will increase your inflammation and will shorten your telomeres. This person did have shortened telomeres. Their biological age was much older than their chronological age. Let's look back at the slide and let's see the good news. These people, this particular subject, as did all the subjects in the experimental group, used the NeuroCycle, which is the second half of the book. And the second half of the book is all about how to do the NeuroCycle with all the applications. And by the time day 21 hit, which was 3 weeks, this person's brain had gone gray, which is great. You want to gray brain. That means that those waveforms are stabilizing. Those waveforms are kind of getting into a nice, even kind of flow, and that's wonderful. And that if you look at the green at the front of the brain, that shows a shift in identity. So at the beginning of the study at day 1, that particular subject was saying, I am depression. My life is a mess. Not only did we look at the brain and blood, but we also did psychological measures. And we did my measure that looks at self-regulation. And we also, most importantly, looked at their narrative. They told us the story of their life. What's so important in this day and age is to recognize that we can't treat you like a machine, like an avatar, like just a brain. And we have to look at your whole story. So this person had been told they were clinically depressed, and their identity at the beginning of the study was depression. What I told them with my work and with what they learned through the NeuroCycle is that they are not depression. Depression's not an illness. Depression's not an it. Depression is a warning signal that something's going on in your life. So by day 21, when they had gone through the 5 steps every day for 15 to 45 minutes, at day 21, when we brought them back in and took their narrative, spoke to them about their narrative and did all the other measures, we found that they were saying things like the following: I am not depression. That's not my identity. I now know why I have depression. I see depression as a useful messenger, and I'm starting to see why I had depression in the first place. I'm starting to see the roots of the tree, the origin story. By day 63, they were saying, I now know so much more about the origin of depression. I recognize I will still have bouts of depression, but depression's no longer an it. It is simply a warning signal, and I now know how to manage it. So when it comes up, I know my triggers, I know my activators, and I have a plan of action to manage the depression. That is radically different. So by day 21 and 63, the inflammation levels had dropped, their telomeres on their DNA were normalized, their brain had stabilized, and they had reduced their biological age, matched their biological age, matched their chronological age, which meant that their vulnerability to disease, which was at a 75 to 98% level on day 1, had reduced to literally this literally disappeared. That vulnerability, that high level of vulnerability had dropped radically right down on day by day 63. You see, the environment that we create with our mind increases our vulnerability to disease. So I'm not saying that if you think a bad thought, you're going to get sick. I'm just saying that the science shows that the more toxic you are and the more unmanaged your toxicity, we're all toxic, we all make a mess, okay? That's not what I'm not saying, that you're never going to completely get rid of that. What I'm saying is that when you manage it, that's when you reduce your vulnerability to disease. So it's not a direct correlation of I now have been jealous of this one, or I haven't dealt with this, therefore I'm going to get cancer. I am not saying that. All I am saying is that the research shows that if we have an unmanaged mind, our threat to survival exists in a very real way. Those toxic areas in the brain have increased damage to the brain, and you've increased your vulnerability. So the hope is the thing that keeps us alive. The hope is that, okay, you can change it by embracing, processing, and reconceptualizing. Look at the next slide very quickly, and you'll see that this is of one of the subjects in the control group. And there you'll see a red brain. And they were made more and more aware through the testing of the issues, but they didn't get the NeuroCycle, so they got worse and worse. The red brain shows incredible levels of high beta, which is the crest of the wave. Too much of that and not enough of the other waves. And that's kind of brain where you just think you cannot even function. You're burnt out, you feel crazy, you just feel like it's too much, and you're frantic and all over the place and panicky. And this doesn't have to be your life. Now, you can get into those states. I mean, I get into red brain states, but I can get myself out of a red brain state very quickly. I can get in a blue brain, and I can get out of a blue brain very quickly with neurocycling. Okay, so just moving on. Let's look at the 5 steps of the NeuroCycle. Before we do, we have another urgent announcement. This is live. Don't remember. Okay, fix that. Do remember to be entered in the giveaway post-order confirmation to social media, and make sure that you tag us. So to enter the giveaway, post something on social media, make sure you tag us, or post that you've pre-ordered the book. So those are the 2 requirements. If you don't do that, we can't enter you in the competition. If you don't tag us, we don't know you've entered the competition. So post your pre-order and tag us, or post something about what you've learned on this and tag as well. Okay, so don't forget to tag me, okay? Tag Dr. Caroline Leaf. Otherwise, we can't find you. Okay, so back to the 5 steps of the NeuroCycle. And I briefly introduced you to those when I spoke about the little exercise I did with my husband. And that was just a little quickie one. So here are the 5 steps. The 5 steps of the NeuroCycle are gather. And gather is getting awareness of your emotional and physical warning signals. And then the second step is to reflect. And what are you doing? You're reflecting on the data these signals are what they are by asking, answering, and discussing with yourself. The third thing is to write down the answers and information. The fourth thing is to recheck, which is recheck what you wrote and try to identify patterns and triggers. And the fifth step is the active reach. Craft some kind of affirmation or something that is an action to help you practice reconceptualizing the new healthy thought. Okay, so if you have a look at the next slide, this is just an example of a structure called a Metacog, which is the way that you write the information. So what I do is I recommend that you get yourself a journal, a nice big journal, call it the NeuroCycle journal, and as you're working through the NeuroCycle, use your journal. Now, obviously, if it's the day-to-day stuff, you don't have to use your journal unless you want to make a record of it. Because if you find that, like, for example, if I always responded to my husband like that, if it was a regular pattern, then I would need to go and do a 63-day, a whole 63-day NeuroCycle process in order to find out why I had that pattern. A pattern, something you keep doing, is coming from an origin story that needs to be addressed, and you've got to reconceptualize it, or you're going to carry on doing that. And as you carry on doing that, you're increasing your toxic environment and increasing your vulnerability to disease. Okay, you don't want to do that. That goes against survival. So you want to bring back to survival. So I put these up here to show you what the structure looks like, and there you'll see the 5. Look at the one on my right, your left first, and you'll be looking at the same. The one on the right. Gather, reflect, write, recheck, active reach. There you can see the description, and it's exactly the same. There's just a summary of what the 5 steps are. On the left is one for how you would apply this with children. Now, if you pre-order, you're going to get the whole a little chapter on how to use neurocycling for children. And I've also, if you subscribe to my podcast, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, I am also doing a neurocycle for how to apply this to children. And down the line, it's already in progress, I'm writing a book on neurocycling for children. So in the meantime, and also in the NeuroCycle app, there's a NeuroCycle guide for how to apply this with children. So basically, with children, if you look back at the slideshow, look at the left one, you can just get very visual with your kids. And the biggest way to help a child is you using the NeuroCycle yourself, and you being very open and honest about your own emotions and showing how you progress through. The whole point of the NeuroCycle is you are processing through a situation. So just let's look back at me again, and let me quickly make a lot of sense out of these 5 steps for you first. Then I'll quickly tell you a little bit about how to apply it with children. Okay, so here we have a toxic thought. You've seen this now plenty of times. We know a thought is a real thing, and a thought is what is the consequence of mind in action. Mind is that 99% part of you. So remember, mind is that gravitational field, that 99% part of you that's around you and moving through you. It's all that sciencey, quantum physics, gravitational field stuff. On a psychological level, mind is how you think, feel, and choose. Brain and body are the physical. Mind uses the brain and body to make the little protein trees, the good and the bad, or the healthy and the toxic, and also to be able to express yourself. So you need your brain and your body to express your mind, what you say and what you do, you as a unique person, all the things you say and do. Okay, so that's the basic thing. So you think, feel, and choose to build thoughts. So thoughts are the consequence of what you are thinking, feeling, and choosing. Now, as a tree, we all know trees have roots. Okay, you can't see the roots here, but you know there's roots here. So you first plant the seed, you get the roots grow into a stem, and you get branches and leaves. So thoughts have the same structure as I mentioned earlier on. The seed and the root part is the origin story, what happened, the trauma, the abuse, the bullying, the political situation, the racist incident, every experience, looking at social media on Instagram, the argument with my husband, the people pleasing because you're going through social media, the events, every little event that you go through during the day, you make little trees. So you're going to the source of the information source, the root stuff that's coming from the experience is there, and then your interpretation is the tree trunk and the branches and the leaves, how you perceive that in your life. So for example, if there's an abuse and there's all that terrible thing that happened, that very often, if it's a young child, even an older child can be translated into I am shame. So the tree trunk is the perspective of shame, and then that manifests in emotions and behaviors that are related to shame. And this whole thing combined produces behavior patterns in the child's life that are reflective of something going on. Okay, so this is a healthy tree. That would be a toxic tree. Obviously, an abuse or trauma would be a toxic tree. So the point of the 5 steps is 38 years of intensive research, 5 simple steps, but they are based on 38 years of intensive work of looking at how does the mind work, all the stuff I've been saying, and I've meticulously worked out how to identify a toxic thought and break it down. Embrace, process, reconceptualize. Identify, deconstruct, and reconstruct in order to change this from this dangerous, unhealthy pattern that's threatening your survival and your functioning and your cognitive, emotional, social, everything, relational functioning, to change it into something that works for you. You're going to reconceptualize it into something that works for you. It doesn't mean that what happened to you is good, but if you haven't dealt with it, it's still controlling you. It has power over you, and that threatens your survival and creates toxicity and brain damage and damages your brain and body. So by doing the 5 steps meticulously in the way that they've been meticulously worked out, when you do this happens. When you do step 2, this happens. When you do it in that order, this happens. You don't skip the steps. You don't change the order. And I've explained very, very, very clearly and carefully in the book what they are, how to do them with stories. The second part of the book is all about how to do the 5 steps of the NeuroCycle with a lot of worked examples of the pattern, the ones over time, plus also the ones that you can do in the moment. Okay, so what we're going to do now is talk about the process, and then I'm going to explain to you the timing of it, the 63 days and the in the moment stuff. Okay, so let's say now that you recognize that you have a pattern of, let's say, you're feeling really depressed, and it's like a lot of times, almost every day, that you're noticing depression, or depression and anxiety, because very seldom is it one emotion. That's important. I want to just stress that. We don't just have depression. These things are what we call comorbid. Depression, generally there'll be anxiety, or there'll be some despair, or there'll be some grief. So there's generally a lot more than just one emotion. And depression is not a disease, okay? In our current model for the last 40 years, the model of how to understand people's pain or misery has been subsumed into what we call the biomedical model. What that means in English is that you are seen as your brain, and if you are having any kind of emotional trauma, then that is defined as, well, that's who you are, that's your identity. You are depression, you have clinical anxiety, you have clinical depression. So it's been likened to a disease of the body like cancer or diabetes, but that's not accurate research, and that hasn't helped the situation. It's contributed to the fact that people are dying 8 to 25 years younger, which is the statistic I gave you earlier, which is in the book. I have a whole chapter 1 explains all the stuff that I'm talking about now. The current mental health system, and the reason why people are dying younger, and how we can change that. There's so much hope. Everything I'm telling you that's bad, I'm just making you aware, but I'm giving you the solution. The book is the awareness plus the solution and the skill of how to develop. And the solution being the mindset around the NeuroCycle and how to do the NeuroCycle in every aspect, because our mind's always controlling everything. Okay? So when you're using the 5 steps, we can't see depression and anxiety. Let's say it this way: depression, anxiety, all these things are not illnesses of the brain. They're not neurobiological brain diseases. Let's say that you go to a dinner party, and you're going to a socially distanced dinner party, okay, and you are talking in the conversation. It comes up, and you say, "Oh, I have a neuropsychiatric brain disease." The conversation will go dead. But if you say, oh my gosh, this happened to me, and I'm so depressed about this, and you tell your story, everyone connects, because everyone will say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, and this happened to me," and there will be a relationship. So what I'm saying is that our current model is sticking you in a label, sticking you in a box, and invalidating your experience. The second part of the story, where you tell your story, and where people respond, and that helps you, that's what it should be. And that's what I'm proposing. And that's how mental health has never been handled very well, unfortunately. But it used to be in the sort of 70s and 80s, we did consider the story more. But then we shifted, as neuroscience advanced, into clinical neuroscience, where everything was about the brain. So we need the information about the brain, but we need to put it in perspective. So everything you see, the brain, that's happening in your brain in terms of mental health, that's your brain responding. Mental health is not on the rise. It's definitely not on the rise. We hear the statistic: 1 in 4 people are depressed, and 1 in 5 people have anxiety, and it's getting worse, and it's going to be worse post-pandemic. And during the pandemic and so on, we're going to have another pandemic of mental health, and everyone's got this terrible fear. And the solution to that is to say, well, let's label and diagnose and treat with medication. That's not the solution. That's not the solution. Mental ill health is not on the rise. Mental ill health has always been a problem since the beginning of time. You're a human, you're alive, life is tough. It's experimental, you're going to make a mess, and if you know how to clean up your mess, you can sort it out. And a lot of the times we do clean up our mess. I'm just teaching you the science of what you do anyway. I've brought the unconscious functioning of how to clean up our mental messes into our conscious understanding, the science of thought, and given it to you as a tool to develop, so that you can consciously learn to grow and develop your mind, which is malleable. And the earlier you teach this to your kids, the better. Okay, so therefore, we need to see these situations not as these emotions not as illnesses, but as warning signals. So here we see the tree. The tree emits a warning signal, and you are going to pay attention to that warning signal. How do you do it? Here's how you do it. Imagine you are in a time capsule helicopter kind of thing, and you are the pilot, and you are the co-pilot. The pilot is the one kind of flying the plane, so it's experimenting, it's trying the think, feel, choose, and you snap and you snarl and you get it right, or you do it right. So it's the experimental part of you going through life. The co-pilot is the wise mind, the survival mind, the wired for love mind. We see in science that our brain and body are wired for love. We don't have structures for anything toxic. We have structures for health, and we have structures for managing our mind. So the minute I say, I'm anxious, I'm clinically diagnosed with anxiety, I can't cope, life's terrible, then I create that damage in the brain that I've been describing, showing you those pictures, the red brain, the blue brain, the telomeres, all that stuff. But the minute I say, the millisecond I say, okay, I'm not scared of that anxiety. I'm not scared of that depression. I am not scared of it. I'm actually going to see it's helpful. It's a helpful messenger. It's telling me something that I need to go and pay attention to. The minute you do that, your body shifts functioning. And I mentioned this earlier. 1,400 neurophysiological responses will now work for you in that instant. So you've still got to fix this. But the fact that you are actually embracing and fixing, your brain is out of that vulnerable state. That's really important to understand. So embracing is why I use the word embrace, because you embrace those that you love. You embrace what you want to welcome into your environment. You welcome the depression because of the message it brings, not because of the depression, because of the message behind it, which is that whole thing, this whole tree thing. Okay, so the 5 steps helps you to meticulously unpack that. So the mindset coming in is you're in your helicopter, and the co-pilot is this wise mind, the wise part of us that we all have. It's at the core of our mind. It's designed as this wired for love nature of the brain and the body. And in the energetic fields of the mind around the brain and body, we see it as this lovely wave that I described earlier on. We all have it. That's our basic functioning. But then as we think, feel, and choose, we kind of mess that basic functioning up. But there's a core part that can't be messed up. So think of this like a forest. There's this massive infinite forest with all these trees. Some are little green trees. Those are just experiences you maybe had today. Some are bigger, medium. Some are huge. Some are really big. Some are green. Some are lighter than others. And then there's clusters of the dark ones in between. That represents all the experiences of your life. It's infinite. There's trillions. You're flying over, and you are now the pilot flying over as you do life. And what happens is that as the co-pilot's flying with you, but the co-pilot has access to the middle of the forest, and the middle of the forest is a strip through the middle that is this beautiful green forest, and it's exquisite and it's perfect, and it never gets messed up. Okay, and that's your wise mind. That's your wired for love nature of your brain and your body. And essentially what happens is that you are going to pay attention to those, land your helicopter by listening to the co-pilot, paying attention to those warning signals, and landing your plane at this tree in the forest, because this particular group of trees is this huge big black clump and sending up these smoke signals, and instead of flying over them, you land the plane and you're with the co-pilot. So you're in this non-judgmental, gathering awareness, embracing state of mind that I call the multiple perspective advantage, which I talk about in the book. You look at the warning signals and you start gathering awareness. So very quickly, gathering awareness, we are not sitting under the apple tree with all the apples hitting us on our head. We're standing back and we're picking the apples off this tree. So you pick first of all, gathering awareness of the different signals. What are the emotional signals? What are the physical warning signals? What are the behavioral warning signals? What are the perspective warning signals? Then you reflect on those, and you stand back and you look at what you've gathered, and you ask, answer, discuss. Reflect is ask, answer, discuss. Be a detective. Put the thoughts on trial. Work out why you've got those. Then you write down that information from what you have gathered and what you have reflected on, and you capture that in written form in a Metacog. And a Metacog is that pattern format that you saw earlier on the slideshow. If we can just quickly put that up, the image of the NeuroCycle. There we go. And you don't have to do it I did this on my phone on an app, but I recommend you do them handwritten into your book. And that way of writing, when you write in a Metacog, it pulls the two sides of the brain together. We can look back at the brain. I'm going to show you the brain again. It pulls the two sides of the brain together, helps you get much more deep and insightful, and really get to the core of the issue. So Metacog is a phenomenal way of solving problems in your life super quickly. I use it therapeutically, and I've used it. You can use it day-to-day life, in the moment stuff and the long stuff. Then you would write, and when you're writing in the Metacog, you're literally vomiting your thoughts on paper. It doesn't matter how they look. It's not about fancy. It's about get it out. Okay, and then you've got the recheck step where you go in and you sort out what you have written down. And then the active reach is to cumulatively take those four and create an action that is like a full stop on a sentence. That is what you've learned that day, a positive little action or statement that could be something as simple as, I am not shame. I practice your if only today. You will get through this. A simple little statement that you can work through. Last thing, and then we're going to dive into the questions, is that if you recognize a pattern in your life where there's some underlying trauma or toxic habit. So it doesn't take 21 days to change a habit. it takes 63. Okay, so important. There's very little research on it. I talk about that research in my book. I've done the scientific research showing that within 21 days, you will break down and build a new thought, but that new thought's a tiny little tree in that forest and doesn't have enough energy to impact your behavior. So if you want a pattern to change in your life, if you want a behavior to change, if you're battling with relationships and you keep having the same issues, you need to go to 63 days in order for you to actually change that pattern. So you do the 5 steps every day for 15 to 45 minutes. And then at day 21, you would have broken this down and reconceptualized it into this. And then for the balance of the 42 days, you just practice step 5. It takes you a minute a day. So the last 42 days is quick. It's a minute a day. So you can write this down somewhere. I explain this in depth in the book. In the NeuroCycle app, we've got a little section that's got active reach reminders where you can type this in. So it pops up on the app on your phone, and it will remind you to do these. But the extra 42 days gives us sufficient energy for this one, the new reconceptualized one. You've got to water it, give it energy so that it is strong enough to go from the non-conscious mind into the conscious mind. Only when it can access the conscious mind will we see behavior change. You can only change what has got enough strength to actually have been before changed into a habit, and that is when it moves into a conscious mind, it means it's strong enough and we will see behavior change. So last statement in relation to this, many people say, but I've tried this and I'm stuck, or I've gone to therapy and I'm still stuck, or I'm aware of I've got social anxiety because I was bullied at school but I can't seem to get over it. You've got to systematically work on it daily. This quick fix mentality that has come from the technological age that we live in has created a problem. Nothing is a quick fix. This is hard work. We have to work hard at this. So that's why I've systematically worked out for you the systematic scientific way that you can change your mind to make it work for you and not against you. And now we are going to transition over to the questions. But just before, don't forget about the giveaway. Don't forget about posting on social media that you've either pre-ordered the book, and you'll post the pre-order, tag Dr. Caroline Leaf, or post something about this conference, what you've learned, a photograph, and tag me. And then also don't forget to pre-order your book. Go right now and pre-order this book. You need to pre-order this book. If you pre-order it, it's released on 2nd of March, you get all those wonderful bonuses like extra chapters and a month free of the NeuroCycle app and a 3-week book club like this. Incredible bonuses to help you. So go pre-order that right now. And now we're going to transition to the questions. So we have some people in the green room waiting, the tech green room, waiting for us to answer questions, waiting for me to answer questions. And we got tons of amazing questions. Obviously, I couldn't answer all of them, but we've selected a few. And then if there's time at the end, I am going to run through some of the other questions that we don't cover directly. Okay, so we are going to have our first guest coming on. Is that correct, team? Amy's coming on. So our first guest coming on is Amy. And Amy will be joining us, and she's going to ask me a question, and then I'm going to answer that. Okay. Hi, Amy. Hello. Can you hear me? I can see you. Okay, I don't think she can hear me. Hi, Amy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes, I can. Hi.
Sorry, I'm visually impaired, so I'm trying to squint at the camera.
Oh, no problem. No problem. How lovely to meet you.
You too. I love your work. I'm working hard to get the book, but the audio version isn't working for me right now, so that's okay.
Well, the audio will work from 2nd of March. It'll be available, so then it should be working. So that's possibly.
I was just having trouble getting it, so I was wondering what the font size of your book is, so that maybe I can try getting the paper copy instead.
Well, if you send us an email, we can handle that. We can just send us an email. We can give you information on both of those questions. But you had quite a specific question, Amy. Can you just say where you're from, and then ask your question, and then I'm going to answer your question.
Okay, so I am from British Columbia, Canada. All right, and so then I'm going to ask my question. Okay, so is there a NeuroCycle for high-stress situations such as work, moving, school, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So essentially that is pretty much our day-to-day stuff that most of us are living in. So, that we have so many acute high stresses, but you specifically referring to a combination there. A move or starting a new school or something like that would be an acute stressor where it's that sudden, you've suddenly got to deal with that, and it's quite a strong impact. Yes, there is, and in the book, and I'm going to just run you through in a moment, but in the book I actually have a NeuroCycle for dealing with an acute stressor, like going to school. I'm just going to open that up and tell you which page it's on. Okay, Dominique, can you just find for me? I put it in my notes there. And then and I'll answer both parts of the question. The other part is like work. Work isn't more of a chronic stressor, more something that's ongoing. So the thing with the work is to, once again, if the stress of work, a lot of the time, you got to find the reason what the stressor is. So you need to work through the whole tree. So you need to first ask yourself, start with what are the warning signals. So ask yourself, what are the emotional warning signals? So it may be that you are frustrated, or you're feeling tired, or you're feeling overwhelmed. Be very, very specific in defining your emotional warning signals. And we've got, there's a whole, in chapter 12, Amy, in chapter 12, and for those watching, there's a whole chapter on trauma. And in this, I cover acute trauma, which is the sudden things like a move, like death of a loved one, those things that, sickness, the things that hit you out of the blue. There's a whole section on how to do that. I define trauma in general. And then there's also a section on the big T trauma and the small T trauma with worked examples. Okay. So just so that you know that that's in chapter 12. What I also have that is very, very helpful in here is an emotional warning signal guide. So on page 203, I have an emotional warning signal guide, which are emotions. So when you're looking for those emotional warning signals to help you, then sometimes we can't always think of the words to describe how we're feeling. So things like you can then select, are you feeling angst, anguish, anxiety, apathy, whatever. So there's a whole bunch just to help you. What's also really super helpful is on the next page, I have an emotional warning signals guide, which helps you to rank how you feel on the first day that you start NeuroCycling. Because if it's a chronic issue, which it's happening, in other words, it's a pattern, it's a consistent thing happening over time, you definitely want to find the underlying cause and the patterns and triggers so that you can reconceptualize that. So then it's a good idea to track your emotional intensity. So for example, 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 10, with 1 to 3 being okay-ish emotional intensity, or 7 to 10 much more extreme. And then you can track over time. So it's really important that you get yourself a NeuroCycle journal, and that you make sure that you track everything, and a nice big journal. And every time you work on a NeuroCycle, you should be dating it, filling it in, working through it, so you can actually track your progress, because that visual aid gives us help. Otherwise, we kind of do it a bit and then we don't do it, and then we do it a bit and then the consistency is very, very important. So the first thing then is to look at your emotional warning signals. Secondly is what are you feeling physically in your body in that moment about work. So you could just take in general, start in general about work, and think, because then as you work through the NeuroCycle, you'll get more specific. So in general, how do you feel when you think about work? So the emotional, then the physical. Tension in your body, gut issues, nausea, shooting adrenaline, tension in your shoulders, whatever it is, be as specific as you can. You're just gathering awareness. Remember, you have the pilot and the co-pilot. You've landed your helicopter at this tree. And why the reason it's a time capsule is because everything about work is not just about the now, it's also about your past experiences informing your experience at work. So that's why I say it's time travel. We go into the past because the past influences how we function in any one moment. So when you look at this tree, you're not going to just see the present, you're going to see the past and also your hopes for the future. So you're kind of going through all three dimensions, present, past, and future. So you're going to land that tree, you're going to look at the emotional warning signals, you're going to look at the physical, you're going to look at the behavioral signals. So what are you doing? What are you saying? How are you reacting? How are you managing your work? What's the quality of your work? What is your interaction on email, on Zoom, in live when we are interacting with people? What are your behaviors with your kids, your husband, etc.? And then you're going to look at your perspective. How is this work crisis affecting your perspective? Are you seeing that it's actually that life is just terrible? And is it terrible because it's just related to the work? Or is it that when you're out of the work situation and you're back in your normal situation, it's kind of okay, so it's just within the work environment? Or is it a point where it's so chronic, where it's been so long term, that it's now seeping into how you manage your relationship with your family and how you just feel in general? So you want to gather those signals. So that's gathering awareness. Remember, always get into the stance of you with your co-pilot, the wise mind, and think of you picking off those as though they're apples that you're picking and putting in your basket. You're giving yourself also permission to feel this. It's totally okay to feel anxious and depressed and overwhelmed and worked up, and we've got to start giving ourselves grace. It's okay. Those are not bad. They're simply telling you something. If you see them as bad and you feel guilty, all that energy is now going into the sort of guilt. You kind of lump that all into guilt or shame or condemnation or something, and that then makes it worse. So as soon as you feel that happening, that's another warning signal. Grab that. All these warning signals are energetic, they're energy, and energy can never be lost. It can only be transferred. So you can make the decision at that point to say, okay, I'm not going to, I see the guilt, I own the guilt, I feel guilty because of. That's where when you start going to the reflect step, to grab the guilt, put it in the basket, and there's no condemnation in that. You're making it work for you instead of against you. So by embracing it and seeing it as a helpful messenger, you then are shifting your brain into a very resilient state. You bring this thought up from the toxic, from the non-conscious mind. And the non-conscious mind, it can't be changed. It's just driving you. It's just that tree in the forest that's driving how you're functioning, and you're feeling worse and worse. But as soon as you're aware of it, you've shifted the power balance instantly. Now you are controlling that situation instead of that situation controlling you. And don't rush yourself. Another, just a side note, don't think, oh, this has got to happen quickly. It is going to take you probably 63 days, which is 9 weeks, to get yourself into a position where you get this all worked out. And that's very important. I'm not giving you 5 quick steps that you do these 5 steps today and tomorrow works great. That's not realistic. What's realistic is that you're going to have to work through this in a 5-step process daily. So once you've gathered awareness, you then go to the second step, and you need to start asking yourself, why do I feel this angst? Is it from, and you ask, answer, and discuss with yourself. Is it from this? Is it from that? And you do this very, very systematically. Gather first. Once you've gathered all those, then ask. It's this detective process. Why do I feel this angst? Is it because I've got too many tasks? Am I people pleasing? Am I not creating boundaries? Or I'm feeling this constant anxiety because there's just too much pressure because of this. So in other words, get to the core, ask until you can find out why you're doing that. You won't find this out on day one, because you're only doing it for 15 to 45 minutes. If it's 15 minutes, you're only going to spend about 3 minutes on each. You're not supposed to solve it in one day. You can't. But tomorrow you can come back, and the next day you come back. So you've got to give yourself grace. I can't stress this enough, because people may be thinking, okay, well, I'll do one thing and try and find the roots, and that's it in one. No, you won't find it in one day. In the first day, you may not even see the roots. It may take you 3 or 4 days before you actually start seeing the origin. You may see it straight away. Like you may see, okay, well, there's just, I've got no boundaries. And that's great. If you see that the first day, that's great. But then we have to find out, why do you not have boundaries? Why can't you say no? Are you people pleasing? And those are the kinds of things that will start coming up as you move through the days. So the reflect step is done to ask yourself and answer and discuss with yourself like a detective to find out why you had those specific signals. And you can see I'm being very specific. You write this, you gather awareness of each of these, and you reflect on each of these. And then the third step is you write it down. So you put down in the middle of your page that this is being overwhelmed at work, too much going on, and you start creating these little categories where you start this information that you gathered the signals about, and the 4 different signals, and the ask, answer, discuss. You write that down. You just pour it all over the page. It doesn't have to be organized. Maybe you've got a line coming out here and some stuff there, and then you write some stuff there, and then you draw an arrow there, and then this thought comes in and that thought comes in. That's why the Metacog is so great. You can see it's a pattern. That as you create the Metacog, it doesn't have to be perfect. The next step, the recheck, is where you can go and start making order of it. So generally, the right step is very messy. Then the 4th step is the recheck step, and that's where I recommend that you take another color and you start rechecking, because now you can start seeing, okay, what are my activators? What are my triggers? What are my patterns? What's going on here? And you start seeing, because you've done the 3 prior steps, you've dragged stuff out of your non-conscious mind that you weren't there. You started dissecting this tree. So you pulled out stuff from the roots, etc. And you can start rechecking and say, okay, well, I'm starting to see that there's all over the page where I wrote, I'm saying, I'm tired, it's too much, I can't do. Okay, so that's a pattern. Why? What are you tired about? What is this thing that's causing you so much tiredness at work? Is it that and then you see, oh, I think I'm not saying no, I'm people pleasing. So now we're starting to get to the root. We're starting to see in the 4th step, we're starting to see, okay, I'm tired because I don't know how to say no. I'm people pleasing, therefore I'm not setting up boundaries, and that's great insight. So then your active reach for the day would be, okay, well, I have to sort out this people pleasing thing. That's why I'm feeling so exhausted. I don't know how to say no. And you could then summarize that into a little statement and write that statement out, and then you remind yourself about that statement the rest of the day. It's okay to feel tired, something like, it's okay to feel tired, and I'm feeling tired because I can't say no. Or practice saying no today. And then tomorrow you pick up where you left off, the work you did. You look at what you've written onto your Metacog. The recheck is done in another color. You've done your little active reach statement. You practice it today. Tomorrow you pick up on all of that, and then you continue the process. Okay? Does that help you?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that kind of ties into my second question. I think ultimately I just need to get the book. Somehow I've got to get the book.
Yes, you got to just go pre-order and you get all those bonuses. I mean, it's so super easy. Pre-order and get the audiobook is also on pre-order.
I'm trying. My second question is, what's a NeuroCycle for social anxiety? Because I have a lot of that, even over video, and I think part of that is because I'm visually impaired. Is like trying to understand all the different pictures and slides, and it's like,
yeah, it's a lot, and that's no, absolutely. That's a lot, and there's a lot of information, and that's why you can go back and you can rewatch the video, it's slower and at your own pace. And that's why if you've got the book and the audiobook, you can take one chapter at a time, and you can teach yourself slowly. So that's okay. Social anxiety has I've actually got just want to pull up that quickly pull up my answer to that. Okay, so basically social anxiety is very common. It's not something that's uncommon. It's very common, and we had a lot of questions actually about social anxiety. So I did make some notes on that. We often feel fear in certain social situations, like meeting new people, and as you said, being on screen now and trying to deal with all these things. Yes, it could be related to your visual impairment, which makes you anxious that you might miss something. So you've kind of already got, if you look at the toxic tree, your social anxiety is the warning signal, and the warning signal, what you want to do is become much more specific, because it's very general. In fact, I would call the whole thought social anxiety, and then I would start breaking down the emotional and physical and behavioral and perspective warning signals. It's when you start dissecting in that way, you start getting to a much better way of reconceptualizing. You see, as you dissect the social anxiety into the emotions, the behaviors, the physical symptoms, and the perspective, which are the 4 different types of emotional warning signals. And then as you reflect on them, and as you write, and as you recheck, as you go through the process, you then start getting more information. And that information then helps you to build the deconstruct and reconstruct, and build the way to manage it. So some of the things that I said in terms of doing a little NeuroCycle, you would gather awareness of how you respond in a social situation. So you could take your first NeuroCycle you do on this. You could take this particular you asking questions. So first of all, well done for actually getting online in front of thousands of people. And I won't tell you how many thousand, because that'll make you feel even more socially anxious. But you are in front of thousands of people at the moment. So I want to really take my hat off to you and show you that you actually have done this. You've asked brilliant questions and you've done that. So you need to hang on to the success of this moment as you go and do the NeuroCycle. And this memory of today, of this, is actually, and I'm jumping right to step 5, is a very important active reach. It's the first thing that I would write down in your NeuroCycle journal, is that my active reach for today is that I actually got on camera with Dr. Caroline Leaf in front of thousands of people. And if you want to know the number, I can tell you. And I actually asked her a question, and I stayed connected, and you asked 2 questions. Okay, so that could be your active reach. But essentially what you want to do is you want to gather awareness of how you respond in social situations. situations. Identify each social situation, break it down, because you're going to respond generally in the same way, but you want to know work situation versus this kind of situation versus this many people. So break it down into the different types of situations and then find the signals for each of those situations. Because what you're doing ultimately through the 5 steps is identifying the different situations that really stress you out and finding the triggers and then the antidotes. That's what the 5 steps will do for you. So you gather awareness, then you reflect on each of those, and this might take a bit of time. This might take, remember, 63-day cycles. You might do 4 or 5 of these cycles, but at least it's going to be at least 63 days. Okay, in the first 21, you do all 5 steps. The second 42 days, you do just the 5th step. So then you reflect on why you respond to those emotional signals in each specific way. So if you say in a large situation, when there's a lot of people, you just freeze up, you feel this, you feel that, why, it's just so overwhelming. So at least you know what it is, and then you write that down, and then you get to the right where you write it all down. Then your recheck would be, okay, well, the pattern there is too many people. What could I do? What are some of the things I could do? And here's some little things you could do. First thing is you can remember that you coped today. So you hang back on a past experience and you remind yourself. So you walk into that room with a crowded room and you're freaking out and you say, okay, I went on camera with Dr. Caroline Leaf in front of, let me tell you, close to 12,000 people, and you did it. Okay, you remind yourself of your past success and any other successes, and that will immediately change your brain resilience and immediately shift you into that less vulnerable state. It will change your neurophysiology so you have more oxygen and blood flow to the front of your brain, and you'll therefore be stronger to handle the situation. You can also do a little exercise that I call the 10-second pause, which is where you breathe in for 3 counts and you breathe out for 7. And so you breathe in for 3, out for 7. That's 10 seconds. The reason you breathe out longer than you breathe in is because that pushes oxygen to the front of your brain, and that decreases impulsivity, which means that you will react with flight and fright. So it helps to calm down your parasympathetic nervous system. It helps to calm down the neurochemical chaos. You can make that exercise even stronger by adding 3 words, which brings in a cognitive component to the breathing. So as you breathe in for 3, you say think, feel. And as you breathe out for 7, you say choose. You push it out, choose. You really whoosh it out. Now you can do it in your mind while you're looking with a smile on your face, or you can go in the bathroom and just do it, or something like that, into the restroom, or go hide in a corner somewhere and just do it. If you do this 6 to 9 times, which will take you around about a minute, you would have reduced the neurochemical chaos in your brain. You would have balanced the 2 sides of your brain. That waveform will be back online. You've increased resilience, and you'll be more capable of going into the situation. Another little quick technique, which is all I've got time for because I need to get to the next question, is you can visualize, and this is a fun one, you can visualize everyone in the room as being this big. Literally. You know, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, that movie. Think of that movie, and everyone's that small. So you the person, and they're tiny, and you're the big person there, and that will give you a sense of a little bit of internal power over the situation, and you'll just help you to just navigate the situation more effectively. So once again, the answer is to work through, go through the 5 steps and work through the 5 steps daily. Identify the different social situations, work out your little active reaches, and get yourself prepared for each situation. So preparation is a huge part of it. The NeuroCycle is going to help you with the preparation. And obviously, everyone, this information that I'm telling you is in this book. So this is just a walkthrough. I can't go into absolute depth in this time that I have, but I'm just trying to give you an overview. Pre-order the book. Get the NeuroCycle app. You get the pre-order bonuses if you get it before the 2nd of March. And this has really got detail to help you. There's so much information in here to really help you work through all these different situations. The NeuroCycle is mind management, self-regulated mind management that can help you in every situation. Okay, so we've got our next. Thank you so much, Amy. Well done.
Thank you so much.
I'm proud of you. Good job.
Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, next person is, who do we have next? Ariel. Hello. Hi, Ariel. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having us on.
My pleasure. Can you just tell us, we know your name, where you're from, and what your question is?
Okay, I'm from Maryland, the Eastern Shore of Maryland, the United States. I have a 3-part question. I did your mental health summit, and I just had a follow-up question from that. But what exactly is suppression? Is it the same as choosing not to think a thought? how do you take your thoughts captive? And also, you said about embracing thoughts. How do you embrace a thought that isn't true, but it feels so true without giving it power or accepting it as true?
Absolutely brilliant question and such a good one. I'm glad you asked it. So thank you. Okay, so what is suppression? What does it mean to capture thoughts? And what does it mean to embrace? Those are, it seems so weird to say embrace something that's making you feel bad. But the concept of embrace, as I mentioned earlier, you embrace someone that you love or you embrace people in your home. So it's a welcoming thing. So you are actually welcoming that emotional warning signal, not because of how it makes you feel, but because of the message that it carries. Because a warning signal is like an alarm. The alarm goes off in the morning. It's telling you to get up. It's telling you something. So what I'm saying is shift your perspective, reconceptualize from, oh, depression is bad. I must suppress it, push it down, get rid of it. And I'll handle the suppression part in a moment because I just want to handle embrace first. And say, this is wonderful. I see this as a helpful messenger. The minute you do that, you are then shifting the power balance. The minute you say, I embrace, this toxic issue that you're embracing then moves into your conscious mind. On a neuroscientific level, those little branches, the protein branches that this toxic tree is made of in your brain, they become weakened. The little branches become looser. The chemical structure starts changing, which means it's malleable, which means it's changeable. You can change, and this is how you change. Okay, so the first step in being able to change is to embrace. You can't change what you don't know, but if you're changing something you're fearful of, then this still stays strong and it kind of stays in control. So by you embracing, you shift the power balance and you are now controlling that issue versus that issue controlling you. So that's the first thing. Now, you may not feel any different, but here's the nice thing to know. I'm the neuroscientist. I've done the research. I've got lots of great images and case studies in the book. So there is stuff happening in your brain and body, which we've seen from our research. Your mind, your non-conscious mind, that's the part of you that's working 24/7. It's the biggest part of you. It's your dynamic, intelligent, huge, massive part of you. Your non-conscious mind and your body and brain know what's going on before you're consciously aware of it. So you can still be consciously aware of feeling awful about feeling depressed, and that feeling of depression or anxiety or despair or exasperation or grief or whatever it is. But by the mere fact that you've embraced it, you've already started creating neurophysiological changes that we've seen. You've already started dropping cortisol, dropping glucose and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's the first thing is to hang on to that fact. And that's why you need to get the book and study the book, is that is going to... there's the images there. Your brain and body are changing. Your conscious mind is a bit slow and will catch up. So that's why it feels so real. Okay, so as you persist and go through the 5 steps daily, you will find that around about there's different time points in the 21-day cycle, the first 21-day cycle. At day 4, there's a major change. Day 7, day 14. By day 7, you are starting to feel in control. By day 14, you feel so good that we have what we call the mastery mirage, where you think, oh, I've got this. And there's a shift. So within 2 weeks of work, there's a shift. And there's a temptation to stop there. You mustn't. You must keep pushing through because you haven't created a sustainable protein change yet for it to the new healthy tree to be formed in the brain, because this one reconceptualizes into this. And then you've got to do the other 42 days to make sure you get behavior change. So that's the one thing. What is suppression? Suppression means that you are ignoring it. So here you're in your little helicopter pilot and co-pilot, and there's the warning signals of the smoke signals of depression, anxiety, pay attention, these trees are waving, you feel awful, but you just, oops, I'm not dealing with this, and you just ignore it and you carry on. But you can't, because that tree is alive. Eventually the fire will burn too much and you will explode somewhere. So genetically in your body, wherever there's a weakness, but those, and in your mind, so however we're all unique, there's no cookie cutter response. But at some point, that vulnerability increases to a level where your survival is being so threatened that those smoke signals get louder and louder and louder, and you can no longer suppress. And in the continued attempt to suppress, that's when people will shift to things like addictions to try and push it down, or medications to try and numb it. And that doesn't solve the problem, because this is still there. It does get worse before it gets better. So it's like a surgery. You have a surgery, you get cut up to get better. It's first painful. Healing from surgery is painful. When we start facing the roots of our suppressed issues, it's awful. And in fact, my subjects in my study, that blue brain one that I showed you, that particular subject said that as they progressed through the days, they were feeling more anxious and more depressed, but in a different way. They weren't seeing it as an illness. they were seeing it as that they actually are facing their stuff, and that the reason they feel the depression and anxiety is because of the stuff, and that it's shocking when you see things that in the past that you didn't realize were there, or that happened to you, or that you eventually start facing. It's very painful, but the only way out is through. And then by day 21 you have that shift. So suppression is trying to avoid it, is pushing it down. We've got to capture those thoughts, and we've got to unpack them and deconstruct them and reconstruct them. Much like if you have an ugly old house that you want to renovate, and you buy this house and it's disgusting, and you take all these photos of the ugly carpets and the mold and whatever, and you break that down, you build a beautiful new house. You've now got this beautiful new space that you're operating in. You're not suppressing it anymore. But if you keep living in that ugly old house, or you keep it there, eventually the house falls down and it affects you. But if you reconstruct it, you remember how you were, but now you've got this new mental space of freedom. Does that answer your questions?
I think so. Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you for answering them, and I hope that I hope you're going to enjoy NeuroCycling and send us some nice testimonies.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Right.
Okay, our next question is coming from Christine. Hi, Christine. How are you? Oops, I can't hear you. I think you're muted. You need to unmute. I think you've muted yourself. You need to just unmute. Okay, we still don't have sound. What is she asking about? I can start answering. Do you know what she's asking?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Yes, now.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Yes,
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. So,
absolutely. Where are you from?
I'm from Germany.
Oh, wow. Are you phoning from Germany? Are you in Germany at the moment? Oh, wonderful. That's lovely.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. So, my question is, how do you recommend dealing with traumatic mental pictures, like seeing someone getting shot or witnessing any other kind of violence?
Okay, excellent question. It's something that we are relevant to anyone at any stage in history, because there's so many terrible things that are going on. So as you experience that issue, it's once again, like I explained in the beginning, it's an experience that's as it happens, it's like literally sowing a seed and growing the roots. So the roots are in our brain. Now, the reason that an emotional, violent experience, seeing terrible things happen live or on TV, is so profoundly impactful, is because the intensity in which it builds is so strong because of all the emotions. So there's so much intensity, there's so much energy that the roots form in a very, very, very quick and strong, dense way. So think of a really strong root system. And even though it's maybe only a short period of time, like a few minutes or whatever, however long it is that you're watching, it forms an incredibly intense, strong memory. So the foundation is very, very strong. That in itself is very toxic. So observing something toxic, we are not used to that, and we're not designed for that. Our wired for love survival mode of our brain and our body will immediately reject that. So as soon as you build this, it's going to be these structures are protein structures, and they're going to fold incorrectly, and the vibration that's inside the little protein structure, which is the information that you're seeing and viewing and hearing and all the data, the emotions and all of that, is very, 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 very strong and erratic, and makes you get that response in your body too, because not only are you building it in your brain, but it's also going to be this very, very, very strong wave in your energy field and in every cell of your body. And your body and brain are made of 37 to 100 trillion cells, and every cell is going to also store that, so your DNA is affected. This all collectively affects your whole neurophysiology. So that's why we feel it so strongly. We feel it in every part of our experience. Now, the fact that we're feeling it so strongly is threatening our survival, because anything toxic, as I mentioned earlier on, like a virus in our body or any kind of bacteria or anything, our immune immune system of our brain is immediately going to respond because this threatens survival. So that toxic imagery is threatening your survival. And that's also why it's so strong to protect you, because it's so strong that it's so in your face that you just have to deal with it. And the more you try and suppress it, the worse it will get. So it's very painful to deal with it, but we have to deal with it because it's threatening our survival. We often hear in the media, and it's incorrect information, that we have a negativity bias, that our brain and mind have a negativity bias. And what that means, essentially, what they're trying to say is that we're drawn to the negative. And it would seem like we have, because what is most of the media and press present? It's all this negative stuff, and people are fascinated with negative movies and people that are murdering people, and there's but it's not that we have a negativity bias, or that we have got this evil gene inside of us, or this evil neurobiology. What we have is healthy neurobiology, but those incidents are going completely contrary to our survival. So we are drawn to them to fix them. Okay, so we're drawn to them to fix them. So it's very important to process. So as you experience that, whatever you're watching, whatever that violent issue is, the roots are sown, immediately the tree trunk is sown, which is generally shock, fear, despair, all those, it's like, this is terrible, and it may be like, a life is bad. Your perspective is your mindset. What does this do to your mindset? Do you now have a fear of, if you're watching, if it's sort of a racist thing, does it increase your fear of racism? If it's a violent attack, do you feel like you're too afraid to go out because this could happen to you? What is your perspective? And that then produces your branches and leaves, which is your interpretation of the event, and that whole thing together is going to impact your behaviors. So in order to deal with that, so it's grown that way, to deal with it, you have to use the NeuroCycle to go back and to reconceptualize. It happened. Reconceptualize means it has happened, but you're going to make it work for you, not against you. And you kind of have to take the NeuroCycle over time, and it is going to take 63 days and maybe more, to take the energy of the pain and transfer that into the energy of that is terrible. And you're going to, your active reach kind of activities would be, how can you contribute to maybe helping this not happen again, or something like that. So your active reaches will be the way that you disseminate that energy to transform it into something that you can manage. But that's going to be a process. So once again, you're going to have to do what I've been saying. You're going to have to start at the top. It built from the bottom up into your brain. It's threatening survival. It's causing inflammation, etc. But now the minute that you actually asked me this question, you shifted your whole brain health. Instead of this being something that is now increasing brain illness, or decreasing brain health and decreasing body health, the fact that you asked the question, and all the listeners listening are benefiting from this, because now we're saying, okay, well, I can embrace that, I can face it. And remember what I said, when it's suppressed, it controls us. When it's out from the unconscious in the conscious mind, we can do something about it. We can't change what we're not aware of, but we can change what we're aware, what we are aware of. So it's hard work, it's time, there's no quick fix. There's going to be a lot of trauma going through this. You may have to talk to someone, you may need to get some coaching and counseling, you may want to sit with a group of people, but this is the system that you would use, and which would be, what are the warning signals? Be very specific. And please, what I want to stress here is it's so important that you get into your co-pilot multiple perspective advantage, which I explain in the book in depth. Okay, when you have an acute trauma, like seeing something violent like this, and there is the whole chapter, as I mentioned, on dealing with acute trauma, where these things I also talk about and explain in depth. But you need to have a support system, because to try and make sense of violence is not something you can make sense of on your own. So it's very important that you're doing the NeuroCycle for yourself, but that one of your active reaches each day should be maybe to just talk to someone in just about what you find out and experience that day. The objective of the NeuroCycle will be to try and make sense. You can't make sense of violence, but to try and help yourself deal with that, and to reconceptualize that, and to take away the energy that's toxic, that's keeping you stuck in that pain. So we never want to lose we never want to lose the fact that violence is unacceptable. So I'm not asking you to do that. That's not going to help you. We have to always realize that is unacceptable. We're drawn to that because it's imbalanced. We want to fix it. So step number one is the first few days of neurocycling. You're going to really help yourself to just process the pain, and the active reaches are acknowledging and helping yourself. It's okay to feel this. It's okay. This is terrible. And then as you talk to someone, it'll help you unpack those feelings and reduce the pain of the trauma of the emotions. Then as you move on through the cycle, by day 21, you start moving into a constructive, okay, this is wrong, what can I do? And then as you go into the 42 days, it's then putting that action, because the first step is an action step, is what can you do to actually change, play some role in changing violence in the future. And it may not be directly to what you've seen, but in general, toxicity or violence in the future. That could happen, which will happen, because unfortunately we live in a very violent world where people are making very violent decisions. But we need to talk about it. We need to allow ourselves to talk about it. We need to allow ourselves to process it. A lot of the time people see these things, in the moment they are in shock, and then as a coping strategy, we tend to push it down. We tend to suppress. But it's not good, because if it sits there in your psyche, it's sitting there like this, and it's causing increasing vulnerability. So we need to pull it up, we need to talk it through, and I cannot stress enough, do the NeuroCycle on your own, but make sure that you have a support system within which you can discuss this, so that you can find the active reaches that move you in a positive direction. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for phoning in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question is Catherine. Hi, Catherine. Hi, how are you doing? Oh, you muted as well.
It's on her end. If you
It's your end. If you can unmute yourself on your end. Still muted? Still muted.
It should be on her web browser.
If you look at your web browser, it should be on your web browser, and there should be a little unmute button. Is this what is Catherine's question? We're just going to for all of you, while we're getting Catherine unmuted, don't forget to pre-order your book. You can go to Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess or drleaf.com. You can pre-order this book. You've got all the pre-order bonuses. And don't forget to enter the competition by sending us a photo of your pre-order, tagging me, Dr. Caroline Leaf, or putting up something about what you've learned from the seminar, about neurocycling, about cleaning up your mental mess. Make sure to tag us, otherwise we won't be able to see you, and we'll be announcing the winners at the end. So have you pre-ordered yet? If you haven't, go pre-order. You need this book. We need to clean up our mental mess. We remember our mind is always working. So if you don't know how to manage your mental mess, then you are being controlled by your mind. People often say to me, how can I control my mind? And I say to them, you've got to self-regulate. You've got to mind manage. And this is how you do it. Okay, are we good? Yep, Catherine's unmuted. Wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
Hi again. Hello, hi again.
Okay, so
You're a little bit quiet, Catherine. Is it possible just to turn up the volume? I don't know if it's on our side.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little bit better. Okay.
Try using both my headphones.
That's good. No, it's perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds great. Maybe use both
Okay.
headphones. Wonderful. What is your question?
Okay.
First of all, where are you from?
I am from the Oregon coast.
Oh, lovely. Wonderful.
Yeah. So I know from some personal experience, and now I'm working with women who are walking through betrayal trauma, that it wreaks havoc on the mind. And I know it's important to honor the process and give grace to what that looks like. But also, I'm curious to know, what does mind management look like for someone who's walking through betrayal trauma?
Okay, so in any trauma, that is trauma, and it's one specific type of trauma, that where someone is betrayed. So what it looks like is it hurts. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but it will get better. That's the main thing. And you have to be very systematic. There's no quick fix, as we know. So what it looks like is really working through the 5 steps very systematically over the 63-day cycles. What we see very often with betrayal trauma and any kind of very there's no cookie cutter approach. But sometimes it will take one cycle of 63 days. But very often, as you're working through, by day 21 of using the 5 steps, by day 21, you start seeing, you get to the point where I say, okay, now I can see I feel betrayed because of this, this, and this. But that's actually brought up another whole element, and it's like a different thought that betrayal was connected to. So all these thoughts, every thought in our brain has an incredible root system, and they connect. And especially when there's some sort of a relational thing that, that connected incident, or sometimes our thoughts are there's such a huge component, and there's so much that happens that multiple thoughts are happening in terms of as we go through life that then connect back to this original source. I often liken the root systems of these toxic thoughts to the redwood forests in San Francisco, because they're very famous for their very extensive root systems. And the root systems, the connections in our brain are very much like that. The connections also happen on a quantum level. So very often we can be 10 or 5 years or quite a long time post the actual incident or incidents, and we still can recall what happens, and suddenly an incident, something will happen, some sort of trigger, or we get into some relationship, or we're doing something at work, or just something happens politically, and it just re-triggers that. And this is the relationship with post-traumatic stress, which is not an illness either. It is simply a response to adverse circumstances. So there's always these connections, and that's why sometimes what it looks like in working through trauma is multiple cycles. And what I've seen from my experience clinically and from my research is that you can work through you work through the whole project. You've got to very systematically. Mind needs to be managed systematically. Mind needs to be trained. So we use our wise mind, that green strip through the middle of the forest, that instinct that I know I should be doing this, but I'm not doing it. Or another example of the wise mind would be someone comes to you for advice, and you give them this phenomenal advice, and suddenly you just think, wow, where did that come from? Well, that came from your wise mind. It's that knowing in your knower. It's just that we all have. It's the survival instinct. It's our pure survival instinct. And we don't always know how to access that when we've been through something like betrayal. Because if you visualize the forest, let's say that betrayal is like maybe 10 or 12 trees. So 10 or 12 different, to give people an analogy, there could be 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 or 30 different incidents that happen, and they've grown, they've been so established, they've happened so many times that they've become so strong that they are generating such a force ripple effect through the mind, and a toxic ripple effect through the mind and brain, that they are almost blocking our access to our wisdom. And that's why we need support. That's why we need the therapy, the counseling, the coaching. No one can fix you, but having someone that you can talk to helps you to give perspective. Perspective means that I can actually kind of wade my way through the toxic dark forest, and I can start seeing the green trees, and I can start accessing the wisdom. I can start listening to the co-pilot, because the co-pilot has direct access to the green trees. So when you're standing there in front of this cluster in your messy mind as the pilot of your life, and you can't see the wood for the trees, you can only see the toxicity of the betrayal, it's so hard to think there's any other way. And that's okay. It's really important that you embrace that. And as I've been saying, you gather awareness of it, and you give yourself permission. It's okay to feel like that. I mean, this and giving people these visual analogies. When I was a therapist still practicing, I did this all the time. And when you talk about helping kids, you've got to get very visual and see that there's that tree's this betrayal, that tree's that betrayal. I don't blame you for getting stuck. Give yourself permission. This is hard. This thing is like hitting, I'm under the apple tree, and these rotten apples from these trees are just all over my life. And as you admit that, then you can say help, and then your co-pilot, the other part of you, the wise mind, can start digging through the forest and going and accessing the wisdom, and so start to help you see that. And what that looks like is that you get into that multiple perspective advantage. You stand back and observe yourself. You use you instead of I. The co-pilot uses the pronoun you, and the Messi can use I. So I feel like this, but the co-pilot's saying, how do you? So then the co-pilot then walks you through, and as the co-pilot's walking you through, so the trees are starting to clear, and so you're starting to see what the wisdom is in the situation. And that's why I always say to land think of the co-pilot in the capsule, this time capsule helicopter kind of contraption, landing the tree and helping you to start making sense. And you go through then the whole process from the signals. It's okay to feel depression. It's okay to, what are they? You have your big basket, it may be huge. And what are those emotional warning signals? Pick each one, be as specific as you can. And maybe you fill one whole basket with the emotional warning signals, another whole basket you gather with all the physical, another whole basket with all the behavioral, another whole basket with the perspective. And then from there, now let's reflect, let's look at these apples, let's start asking, answering, and discussing. Day 1, you're not going to even gather it all. Day 1, you may just get a few. Day 2, you can add a few more apples to the basket. Day 3, and so you go on until day 21. Reflect as well. You reflect on what apples are in the basket. Why am I feeling these emotional signals? What does it mean? Ask, answer, discuss. Ask, answer, discuss. Give yourself an answer. Ask, you answer, why? Answer, why? Discuss, work it out. Write that down. The Metacog is absolutely essential in every situation. But when it comes to trauma, it unpacks things that you don't know even there. It is very, very powerful. It really gets the two sides of the brain working, which means that all the structures of the brain, especially the link between the frontal lobe and the hippocampus, which is like kind of behind your eyes, and the amygdala, which is your emotional library, all of those only working with you, they're responding. But those have all got different jobs that they perform. When your mind stimulates them, they perform certain jobs. And when your mind is working properly, when your co-pilot mind's working properly, those things start working properly, which means the connections, the electromagnetic flow and quantum energy through the brain is more efficient. And that means you feel more resilient, and you're able to have more cognitive flexibility, and you set up a great feedback loop between the mind and the brain. That's what all these things are doing. And all the stuff I'm saying is in the first half of the book. That's why this works. And this is working on an unconscious level. So the other thing that as well as conscious, that you need to tell someone who's working through trauma of betrayal, any trauma, is what I already said earlier on to answer, is that it's happening in your brain and your body. You may not feel it, but the changes are happening. The minute you start embracing, the minute you start gathering, reflecting, writing, rechecking, looking for the patterns, the activators, the antidote, getting to the action, the active reach step, which is like the little antidote for the day, to the poison kind of thing, that each of those steps is meticulously increasing the cognitive flexibility, increasing the blood flow, increasing the great feedback loop, and helping you to dig to the root of why that betrayal happened and how to deal with the betrayal. I mean, you may know the details of the betrayal. Like someone can say that I was betrayed by X person and this is what happened, but I don't know how to deal with it. So you may know part of the roots when you go in, but you've still got to be able to unpack everything and work through the process so that you can reconceptualize. So reconceptualizing betrayal or reconceptualizing anything looks a lot like what is the Japanese call the kintsugi principle, which is the art of kintsugi, which is if a vase shatters to the ground in 1,000 pieces, those pieces, they don't throw the pieces away, they pick up all the pieces. So this is what you're doing. You're gathering, reflecting, you're picking up all the pieces and you're rebuilding, and now you've got this beautiful new vase, and they rebuild with gold lacquer and platinum. So if you look at this tree, so you've got a beautiful new vase, and the story is what's in the lines. So you, over time, and this is also the violence question I answered earlier on, observing violence. Over time, that is part of your story. It means you still cry, you still have pain, but the pain doesn't control you anymore. That's reconceptualization. You don't eliminate the story. It's part of you. You can't eliminate. You have to reconceptualize. So if you look at this tree and you look carefully, I don't know if you can see it, some of the leaves are lighter than others. So the lighter parts would be the reconceptualized betrayal. But now I manage betrayal was wrong. But you want to release. If you don't release, and people will call it maybe forgiveness, whatever you want, but as soon as someone has betrayed you, according to the law of quantum physics, you've become entangled. Entanglement means that in quantum physics, if two particles are put into a relationship, you can separate them as far as you want. If one turns this way, the other will turn that way. In a psychological sense, if someone has betrayed you, you're entangled. There is a quantum connection between the betrayal, your interpretation, how it's impacting your life, and the person who betrayed you. or persons who betrayed you. And those persons have an equally damaging toxic thought in their brain. Don't think it's only you, the victim. The person who betrayed is also brain damaged. Because they've also got the toxic thought, because you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So I mean, even that in itself is a nice thing to tell people. But you're staying connected, so there's still power, there's still control. By neurocycling through the 63 days, in as many cycles as you need, you are severing that energy that is connecting to the other person, and you're releasing, you're insulating, and you're fixing. That's now their problem. You don't have to worry about them. You have to get yourself sorted out and hope that they will, by your reaction or whatever, that they will stop doing whatever that they're doing, or that they'll learn. Does that answer your question? And as I said, all of this is in the book, in detail, in the book and in the app.
Yeah, I thank you so very much. I really love your analogy of the redwood trees, because that's my backyard.
Oh my goodness, I'm so jealous. I wish it was my backyard. Oh gosh, you're in the best
yes,
place.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you. And that's it. We are done with this workshop, and there's still thousands more questions, but that's why you need to pre-order the book, because the rest of the questions that have been sent in, and there've been a lot more, I will be answering in the 3-week book club that we have got coming up. So if you pre-order now, go to drleaf.com or cleaningupyourmentalmess.com. The pre-order bonuses are amazing, including a 3-week book club where I will handle, I promise you, I've got them all here, I will handle the rest of these questions. So if you didn't get your question answered and you pre-order, you'll get it answered, plus more. And there's also a free month on the NeuroCycle app, so much more. Pre-order chapters on how to help your kids with neurocycling. And follow me on Instagram. You get so much help there as well. Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess is my podcast, where you can find out more about what I do. And I'm speaking so fast, I'm tripping over what I'm saying here. Let me do a NeuroCycle to quickly slow down, and let me announce the winners. Okay, so we will choose a winner today. My team said we haven't chosen the winner yet, so you've still got a chance to enter. And we will contact you by email or direct messaging. So you have a chance to enter. If you pre-order the book, send through the receipt, the pre-order confirmation, tag us, or put something up on social media about this event that you've loved. And remember to tag me, Dr. Caroline Leaf. Whatever you post, tag me. One more thing from my team. Is there anything else? That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget, this will be live on my YouTube channel, so subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram. Get the book. I can only do so much. You can do the rest. Thank you so much.